They used to call me the thrift store girl. Every holiday, my sister in her designer dresses and my parents with their smug smiles would laugh at my second-hand clothes, my beat-up car, my simple lifestyle. They said I was embarrassing the family. Cheap, small, forgettable. I swallowed the insults, smiled through the jokes and thought, one day you'll see who I really am. That one day came on Easter Sunday. My sister stumbled across my bank account balance. $9 million. $9 million. Her jaw dropped, my parents' eyes bulged. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, they insisted I hand it all over to her. I couldn't stop laughing. And when they kept pushing, I slammed the door in their faces. But what they didn't know was how I really got that money. My name is Amelia, and for most of my life I was the family punchline. Growing up, my sister Lydia was the golden child. She had the best clothes, the best schools, the spotlight at every family gathering. Meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs, shopped thrift stores, and saved every penny I could. At dinners, Lydia would sneer, "Careful, don't get Amelia too close to the tablecloth, she might sell it at a garage sale." My parents would laugh, clinking wine glasses. I told myself it didn't matter. Money wasn't everything. But the truth hurt. Every joke carved another scar. By the time I hit my 20s, I stopped fighting. I let them believe I was poor, pitiful, invisible. I drove my old car to Easter brunch, walked in wearing a thrifted dress, and endured the usual smirks. Until this year, Easter Sunday. I was carrying a casserole dish when Lydia's husband, trying to be helpful, grabbed my purse to set it on a chair. My phone slipped out, screen lighting up. He froze. Lydia. You need to see this." My stomach dropped. On the screen, bold and unmistakable, was my bank app. The balance. $9,043,221.36. The room went silent. My father blinked. "Amelia, is this a joke?" Lydia's eyes widened, then narrowed. 9 million. I wanted to snatch the phone back, but part of me stayed still. Like Daniel, my late husband, was whispering in my ear. "Let them see." My mother's voice trembled, half outrage, half greed. "Where did you get that money?" Before I could answer, Lydia shot up from her chair, her face flushed. "It doesn't matter where, it's mine. You've been mooching long enough. You'll transfer it to me today." I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that made them all stare. "Excuse me. You don't need it," she snapped. "I'm the one with kids, a mortgage, real responsibilities. You don't even look like someone who deserves that kind of money." My father folded his arms, nodding. "She's right. Be reasonable, Amelia. Hand it over." Something in me snapped. I set the casserole on the counter, walked to the door and said with a smile, "No." Then I slammed it in their faces. But as I drove home, my phone buzzed with message after message. They weren't going to let this go. And I wasn't about to give in. When I slammed that door, I thought maybe it would end there. That maybe the shock would wear off, and they'd realize how absurd their demand was. But my phone kept buzzing. First it was text. From Lydia. "You don't deserve that money. Be a good sister for once." From Mom. "Think of your family. Lydia has children. You don't." From Dad. "You embarrassed us by laughing. We'll talk again tomorrow." By midnight the calls started. I silenced my phone, curled up in bed, and stared at the ceiling. My chest was tight, but not with fear, with rage. They hadn't even asked how I got the money. Not once. All they cared about was taking it. The truth is, no one in my family ever really knew me. Yes, I wore thrift store clothes. Yes, I drove an old car. But not because I was poor. I had learned early on that appearances meant everything to them. And so, I gave them the appearance they wanted. The forgotten daughter, the cheap one. Behind the scenes I worked. I invested every extra dollar I earned. Stocks, real estate, startups. I spent nights studying the market while Lydia spent hers at clubs. When they mocked me for wearing thrift clothes, I smiled. Because that $20 saved was another $20 I invested. And then there was Daniel. We met when I was 25. He wasn't rich either, just smart. Financial analyst who saw potential where others saw risk. Together we built something no one expected. We lived below our means, stacked every win, and took calculated risks. By the time Daniel passed unexpectedly 3 years ago, he left me not only with his love, but with the foundation of our fortune. Through careful planning, through sweat and sacrifice, I grew it to 9 million. Quietly, patiently, without flaunting it. And my family never suspected a thing. The morning after Easter, Lydia showed up at my house. She didn't knock, she banged on the door until my neighbor peeked out through her blinds. When I finally opened it, she pushed past me. "Where's the paperwork?" I stared. "What paperwork?" "The transfer. You're giving me the money, Amelia. Don't play dumb. Mom and Dad agree. It's the right thing to do." I laughed, though my hands were shaking. "The right thing for who?" "For all of us," she snapped, pacing my living room. "You don't even have kids. You don't need 9 million. I do." Her entitlement was staggering. "Lydia," I said slowly, "that money is mine. Earned it. Daniel and I built it together. You're not getting a cent." She turned on me, her face twisted. "Then I'll find another way." Her other way arrived in the form of a lawyer's letter 2 days later. I sat at my kitchen table, the words blurring together. Petition to contest financial assets. Demand for equitable redistribution among blood family. My family was suing me. For money they had mocked me for never having. I pressed the letter to the table, my teeth clenched, fury shaking me. They thought they could bully me into surrender. They thought they could shame me into handing over what I had built. But they didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't the thrift store girl. I was Amelia, the woman Daniel had trusted with his life, the woman who had turned pennies into millions, the woman who would fight to keep what was hers. As I folded the letter, a slow smile spread across my face. They wanted a war. I was going to give them one. The courthouse was colder than I imagined. Not in temperature, but in the way people looked at me, like I was already guilty of something. Lydia sat at the opposing table, her face painted with faux sadness. Beside her, Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while Dad whispered to their lawyer. They looked like grieving saints. And me. I was the villain in their story. The selfish sister. The daughter who refused to share. When the judge called the case, Lydia's lawyer rose first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, my client, Lydia Carter, seeks a fair redistribution of family assets. It is unjust for Amelia Miller to hoard nearly $9 million while her sister and parents struggle. Equity demands sharing." Sharing. I almost laughed out loud. He continued, voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "This is not about greed, Your Honor. It is about fairness. Lydia has children, a household to maintain. Amelia has none. The funds are excessive for one person and should support the greater family." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I stayed quiet. Then the judge looked at me. "Ms. Miller, do you have a response?" I rose, binder in hand, my voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. This is not family money. It is not an inheritance to be divided. It is mine. Every cent." I placed the binder on the table. Inside are years of records. Investments, property deeds, startup equity. My late husband and I built this together. It was never my parents'. It was never Lydia's. It was earned, not given. The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed with your evidence." Lydia's face twisted. She hadn't expected me to come prepared. She shot her lawyer a panicked glance. But their next move was worse than anything I imagined. Lydia stood, her voice cracking theatrically. "Your Honor, Amelia has always been unstable. She hides behind her thrift store lifestyle. But it's just an act. We believe," she faltered for effect, then pressed on. "She manipulated our late father's estate years ago. That's how she got the seed money. She took what wasn't hers and grew it. That's the truth." Gasps echoed through the room. My mother nodded, eyes wide with false grief. "We never wanted to say it, but yes. We think she stole from us. My chest tightened. For a moment I couldn't breathe. They were accusing me of stealing. A fraud. I wanted to scream, but instead I opened the binder. Page after page of clean financial records, audited reports, tax returns, investment receipts. All in my name, all legitimate. And then I pulled out the trump card. Daniel's letter. I unfolded the paper, my late husband's handwriting clear and strong. Your Honor, this is from my husband, written before he passed. It outlines our portfolio, the accounts, and our joint plan for growth. It proves where the money came from, and that it was ours alone. The judge leaned forward, scanning the letter. Lydia's lawyer objected. It could be fabricated. The judge cut him off. It is notarized, legal, and compelling. I looked across the room at my family. For the first time, their smug confidence cracked. I spoke directly to them, my voice steady. For years, you called me the thrift store girl. You mocked my clothes, my choices, my life. But while you laughed, I built something real. And now, when you finally see it, you don't want to believe it's mine. You'd rather invent lies than accept the truth. Lydia's cheeks flushed crimson. Mom looked away. Dad clenched his jaw. But I didn't stop. You say I should share. That's rich, because when I had nothing, you shared nothing with me. When I wore thrift store shoes, you laughed. When I worked nights, you called me pathetic. And now you think you deserve my success. No, Your Honor. Not one penny. The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge raised a hand for silence. This court has heard enough for today. We will reconvene for closing arguments tomorrow. As the gavel struck, Lydia stormed out, her heels clacking against the tile. My parents followed, shooting me looks that could kill. I gathered my papers, my hands shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From victory. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't their punchline. I was the storm they hadn't seen coming. And tomorrow, when the verdict came down, they'd realize just how powerless their greed really was. The next morning, I walked back into the courthouse with my binder pressed against my chest like armor. My heart was pounding, but I reminded myself, you're not the thrift store girl anymore, Amelia. You're the woman who built an empire while they laughed. Lydia was already there, whispering furiously with her lawyer. My parents sat beside her, faces grim. When they caught my eye, there was no warmth, no recognition of family, just hunger. The judge called us to order. This is the final day. Both sides will present closing arguments. I braced myself. Lydia's lawyer rose first, his voice dripping with performance. Your Honor, my clients simply ask for fairness. Amelia has hoarded wealth she cannot possibly use. Meanwhile, her sister struggles with children and debt. This money, though legally in Amelia's name, morally belongs to the family. We urge you to consider the greater good. I clenched my fists. Morally belongs. He wasn't finished. And furthermore, we have reason to believe Amelia is hiding funds in offshore accounts, beyond what she disclosed. A shockwave ran through the courtroom. Murmurs erupted. My stomach dropped. Offshore accounts. That was a blatant lie. I shot to my feet. That's not true. The judge silenced me with a hand. You'll have your chance, Ms. Miller. My lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently. Don't panic. They're bluffing. Unless they can produce evidence, it won't stand. Just stay calm. But calm was the last thing I felt. They weren't just trying to steal from me, they were trying to destroy me. When it was my turn, I stood, binder in hand. My voice shook at first, but steadied with every word. Your Honor, I won't pretend my family's request is about fairness. It's about greed. For years, they mocked me for being frugal. They called me the thrift store girl. They laughed at my choices. But while they wasted, I saved. While they played, I worked. That $9 million didn't fall into my lap. It was built, dollar by dollar, through discipline and sacrifice. I opened the binder and laid out receipts, audits, property deeds. Every record spotless. And as for their accusation of offshore accounts, I said, meeting the judge's gaze. Here is my full tax history. Every cent reported, every dollar accounted for. Nothing hidden. Nothing stolen. Karen, my lawyer, slid the thick stack across the table. The judge flipped through, nodding slowly. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. A voice from the gallery. She's telling the truth. Everyone turned. It was Daniel's former business partner, a man named Marcus. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. He stood tall, eyes locked on the judge. I worked with Daniel and Amelia for years. I watched them invest, struggle, and succeed. Amelia was the careful one. Daniel used to joke she could stretch $1 into 5. That money, it's hers. It was earned. If anything, 9 million is proof of her genius, not fraud. Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia's face drained of color. The judge regarded Marcus carefully. Do you have documentation of your work with them? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus held up a folder. Partnership agreements, investment records. It all matches what she's presented. The judge accepted it, flipping through the pages with a furrowed brow. For the first time I felt the tide shift. When the judge called a short recess, I slipped into the hallway. Marcus approached, his expression kind. Daniel always said you were the strong one, he told me. I should have spoken up sooner. But I couldn't stand watching them tear you apart. My throat tightened. For weeks, I'd felt alone in this battle. Now, for the first time, I had someone at my side. Nelly. Thank you, I whispered. He smiled. Don't thank me. Just finish this. For Daniel. For yourself. Back in the courtroom, Lydia wouldn't meet my eyes. My parents whispered furiously, their confidence crumbling. I sat taller than I had in years. For so long I'd let them define me, the thrift store girl, the overlooked daughter. But standing there with Daniel's letter in my binder, Marcus's testimony on the record, and truth on my side, I realized something. I wasn't defined by what they called me. I was defined by what I'd built. And by the end of this trial I was going to win. When we returned from recess, the air in the courtroom was different. Lydia's perfect hair was frizzing at the edges. Her lipstick smudged from whispered arguments with our mother. My father looked like a man watching his empire crumble. The judge adjusted his glasses. We will now hear closing arguments. Lydia's lawyer shot to his feet. He was desperate now, and desperate men get dangerous. Your Honor, he began, voice trembling with forced indignation. My clients are victims of Amelia's deception. For years she hid her wealth while allowing her family to believe she was struggling. This proves she is manipulative, dishonest, and unfit to manage such sums. We ask the court to consider guardianship. Appoint Lydia as custodian of the funds, for the benefit of the family. Gasps filled the room. My mouth went dry. Guardianship. They weren't just trying to steal my money. They were trying to declare me incapable of handling it. The judge's face was unreadable. Ms. Miller, your response. I rose, binder in hand, my knees trembling. For a moment the courtroom blurred. I thought of every cruel joke, every smirk, every time I'd been told I was less. I thought of Daniel, of his steady hand guiding mine over spreadsheets late at night. His voice whispering, "You're smarter than all of them combined." And then I spoke. Your Honor, my family calls me the thrift store girl. They have for years. They laughed at my clothes, my car, my choices. They saw frugality as weakness. But thrift isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's wisdom. It's what built the 9 million they now want to steal. I lifted the binder. This is not an inheritance. It's not theirs to divide. It's mine. Built from hard work, sacrifice, and love. Daniel and I didn't spend recklessly. We invested. We turned pennies into dollars, dollars into millions. And now, because they wasted their lives chasing status, they believe they're entitled to mine. I looked directly at Lydia. But entitlement is not the same as effort. Gasps again. Lydia flushed, eyes darting away. I turned back to the judge. My voice steadied. If the law punishes someone for being careful, for building instead of destroying, then the law has no meaning. But I don't believe that's what this court stands for. I believe truth still matters. The judge leaned back silent. The gallery buzzed with whispers. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the forgotten sister. I felt like the woman Daniel had always believed me to be. The fighter, the builder, the survivor. The judge raised his gavel. I will deliver my ruling tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned. Ring. The sound echoed like thunder. Lydia's chair screeched as she stood, rage in her eyes. She hissed under her breath. Enjoy it while you can, Amelia. Tomorrow everything changes. But as I gathered my binder, Marcus leaned close and whispered, she's bluffing. And tomorrow you'll prove it. The next morning the courthouse was packed. Word had spread of the thrift store girl with millions, and every seat was filled. Reporters lined the steps outside. I sat at my table, binder closed, fingers laced tightly together. My heart hammered, but my face was calm. Across the aisle, Lydia's smile looked brittle, like glass about to shatter. Mom whispered furiously in her ear, while Dad stared at the judge's bench like a man clinging to the last thread of hope. The judge entered. This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony. Today we render a decision. Silence dropped heavy as stone. He continued, voice steady. The funds in question were built solely through the investments and efforts of Amelia Miller and her late husband Daniel Miller. There is no legal, financial, or moral claim from the petitioners. Their accusations of fraud and incapacity are baseless. A ripple of gasp. Lydia's mouth fell open. The judge raised his gavel. Therefore, all assets remain with Ms. Miller. The petition is dismissed, with prejudice. Ring. The sound reverberated through me like lightning. Relief, fierce and overwhelming, surged in my chest. I turned to look at my family. Mom's face had gone pale, lips pressed tight in rage. Dad slumped back, defeated. And Lydia? Lydia looked at me with eyes full of venom. She hissed under her breath, "This isn't fair." I smiled calmly, for once not afraid. "No, Lydia. This is justice." Outside, the reporters swarmed. "Amelia, how does it feel to win?" I clutched Daniel's letter in my hand. It feels like the end of a battle I never asked for. And the start of something better. For the first time I wasn't the thrift store girl. I was Amelia. A woman who had been underestimated, mocked, and nearly robbed, but who had walked into court and walked out unbroken. When the gavel fell, I thought I would burst into tears. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. For months, my family had circled like vultures, waiting to rip apart what Daniel and I had built. They thought they could humiliate me, call me names, and then snatch away my future. But the court had spoken. The truth had won. I stepped out of the courthouse into the bright spring sunlight. Reporters crowded me, microphones thrust forward. "Amelia, how does it feel to keep your fortune? What do you say to your family now that they've lost?" I lifted my chin. This was never about the money. It was about respect. About proving that discipline and sacrifice mean more than greed and entitlement. And today, justice was served. Their cameras clicked, but I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for myself. For Daniel. For every moment I'd been laughed at, dismissed, underestimated. That night, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was mine. Legally, undeniably mine. My binder of evidence rested on the coffee table, and Daniel's letter lay folded beside it. I traced the familiar handwriting with my fingers. "You're smarter than all of them combined." He had believed in me when no one else did. And today I had lived up to that faith. I poured a glass of wine, not to celebrate the money, but to honor the journey. The truth was, $9 million wasn't what gave me strength. It wasn't the balance on a screen that made me powerful. It was knowing that I had survived being mocked, being isolated, being betrayed, and I hadn't broken. I had grown stronger. Course my phone still buzzed. Lydia's number. I let it ring. I knew what they'd say. Apologies wrapped in manipulation, excuses laced with guilt. But I didn't owe them my time anymore. Family is supposed to protect you, to celebrate your victories, not weaponize them against you. The people sitting in that courtroom weren't my family. They were just strangers with the same last name. And I had finally fully cut them out. The next morning I visited Belmont, the apartment complex Daniel and I had invested in years ago. The tenants gathered when they saw me. A little girl waved from the courtyard, her parents smiling gratefully. "Thank you for fighting for this place," one tenant told me. "If they had won, we'd all be out." I smiled softly. "This isn't just mine. It's yours too. Daniel and I built it to last. And it's not going anywhere." As I walked through the courtyard, sunlight warming my face, I realized something profound. This was what the money was for. Not to flaunt, not to hoard, but to build stability, to create futures, to give security. My family couldn't see that. But I did. And that made all the difference. That evening, I stood before my bathroom mirror, slipping off the thrifted cardigan I'd worn for years. I smiled at my reflection, not because of the price tag on my clothes, but because of the strength in my eyes. They had called me the thrift store girl, as if that was shameful. But that thrift store girl was the one who saved, who invested, who built. That thrift store girl was the one who became a millionaire. That thrift store girl was me. And I would never let anyone make me feel small again. To anyone watching this, hear me clearly. Being underestimated can be your greatest weapon. When people laugh at your discipline, your caution, your thrift, they're handing you the power to surprise them. My family thought I was weak. They thought I'd fold under pressure. They thought they could take everything. But I laughed in their faces. And I walked away not just with my 9 million, but with my dignity. Beach balloon, what about you? Have you ever been underestimated, then proven people wrong? Tell me in the comments. Thumbs up like this video if you believe discipline beats entitlement. Bell subscribe for more cinematic stories of resilience, revenge, and justice. Because sometimes the girl they laugh at becomes the woman they can never defeat.